Hey gang, welcome to Big Brother and the Hodling Company, the podcast about music and Web3 and trying to fend off Big Brother. I'm the Keegan Voice. Today I spoke with Steph Guerrero, who is a Miami-based Web3 builder, artist advocate, and one of the people most committed to protecting the vibrant essence of on-chain music culture. After spending 4 years in various marketing positions at Universal Music Group, Steph made the jump to Web3. She kept into L-Drop, a Twitter space dedicated to Latinx artists, a community she's long championed, and she runs Go for Mars, which is a consultancy that helps artists transitions into Web3. She also operates as the chief marketing officer of Legato, a Web3 licensing as a service platform for creators. Recently, the Web3 label Dreams Never Die held a town hall call to address some tumult and a sudden restructure within the community, which was especially unexpected coming on the heels of a successful release of their Founders Pass, where all 1,000 sold out in less than 24 hours. On the call, some folks largely reduced Web3 to being a tokenized financial system for the existing music industry, which is a facile representation for what has turned into a rich culture and community. When Steph spoke up for that community, she was the recipient of derogatory remarks and treatment. We dove into this, as well as the complexities of music licensing, the role or lack thereof of the major labels in Web3, and the rest of Steph's musical story. We eventually landed on hope and gratitude for the sublimely weird on-chain music culture that refuses to let the bullshit seep into this space. Hope you all enjoy the conversation. Here we go. Hey Steph, it's great to have you here.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. Really excited to chat. As always with these things, I like to start at the beginning and just get a sense of your story, where you're from, when your relationship with music started, and then move forward from there.
So, where I'm from, I was born here in Miami, but I lived for a little bit in South America. My parents are from Ecuador, so I feel like I've always had foot in two worlds. I actually did my primary school in Ecuador, and you know what? But now that you say where my relationship with music started, it makes me think. My mom says that I started singing when I was 2 months old
Oh.
because I would just copy back what she would say.
Mm.
And it's interesting to see them like how early like babies just get this too. Now that I'm a parent too, to see them like they sing themselves to sleep. So I guess that's where my relationship with music started. I was very little, and music has always been around me. I ascribe like certain genres to what comfort spaces, etc. So I've had a very early relationship with music. Formally, where I realized that music was going to be a big thing for me is probably when I was in first grade, or I think kindergarten. They did a test in my school and they figured out that I could match pitch, and a lot of kids my age couldn't do that. And so that was exciting for them. They were like, oh, we need to put her in chorus and she needs to learn more about music. And so I did. But I've always had like terrible like performance anxiety about singing. I don't know what it is. So I knew that wasn't my thing. Like I knew I liked doing it. It was like a thing for fun, but it wasn't going to be my thing. And then the other side of my life was I've always been like really into technology. One of my first Christmas gifts that I asked for was a typewriter because back then computers wasn't like a big common thing. And so my dad got me a typewriter, and then eventually my dad, when computers came around, he like slowly would give me little parts of a computer. Here's a motherboard. This is what it does. Here's the shell. And then by the time I was 10, I think I had enough of the stuff to put it together. And he said, if you put it together and figure out how to like turn it on and run like an operating system with what you know, I will help you connect it to the internet. And I did. And then so that was like my start was like just on the internet. So those have always been my two passions, and it's taken me to this spot where now I work with both music and technology. My start in my music career was basically there was nobody doing social media at the label where I interned at, and I said, "Hey, you need to hire me because I know how to do social media." And I've only done it like at a college level and like for mostly personal use or like local bands that I knew of.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that was more than like anyone that worked at the company at the time. So I said, "Hey, you need to hire me. I think I would do a great job with this." And I literally cold LinkedIn messaged people and connected with people at the social networks, and it was great. And that was like the start. I opened a lot of Facebook pages and a lot of MySpace pages for people. So that was like a fun thing for me to start off doing with. And even now when I see that page has millions or of followers, I'm like, ha, I started that. Like I was there at the beginning. I still have that little bit of pride.
Yeah, as you should. That's really cool. So at what point you discovered that you're able to match pitch from a really young age? You started to sing when you were 2 months old, which is just amazing. At what point was there a point when you thought that music was going to performance or singing, playing in bands, some kind of work on the other side of music where you're actually making it? Did that ever feel like a viable future for you? Or was like after you discovered computers, just, oh yeah, shit, this is really cool. I want to pursue this.
Yeah, it's so weird because the things that I would play when I was little is I would obviously play like dolls and babies, but like I love to sit in my dad's office and just grab the phone and say things, and I would say little words. Like my dad would talk about containers all the time because he would talk about shipping internationally. So I would pick up the phone and I would say container, container. My mom would laugh and she thought it was adorable. I think I always saw myself as like a business person more than a performer, anything else. I never had and it's so weird because I never had this dream of being a singer. Even when I was younger, like all the artists I love and I admire, like I thought they were magic, but I was always on that receiving end rather than like on the performance end.
Who were some of those people that you were listening to where it felt like magic?
Like I was convinced that Michael Jackson was magical and like he was
Yeah.
superhuman in some way or another. There was nothing I couldn't think of that. Also Stevie Wonder, like I just like anytime I saw him perform, I would just get so excited. And I'm pretty sure if I ever were to meet Stevie Wonder, I would just cry and turn into a puddle of tears because it's like there's just someone who I admire so much. Yeah, so those were some of the people that I was like obsessed with. And then of course like I had like my boy band phase where I think everyone like
Hmm.
loved boy bands for a period of their time. At least if
Yeah.
you were female, you definitely loved boy bands.
I also had a boy band phase. I
There you go.
I remember asking for some Backstreet Boys and NSYNC CDs when I was a young child and enjoyed them very much. So
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely have a soft spot in my heart for those days. Yeah, also for MySpace, when you mentioned that, that's brought back a lot of nostalgia as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're getting into social media and you're starting to create these presences for different artists. What happens next in your career and your path?
So what happened is I realized that once I got everyone on social media, I learned as much as I could. I learned a lot about just like marketing music, which I didn't know about. As always, like the music industry does not move as quickly as I would like. And I
Hmm.
realized that there weren't really any mentors. Like the only person who was doing digital marketing there and like that was more focused on like getting good placement on iTunes or starting to do some like media spends. They left to another kind of opportunity. And so there were very little people I could learn from in that space. The record industry is also a lot. And so I decided to just like take a hard left. And there was a new sports channel that opened up here in Miami. And I was like, let me try to do sports and see how I like it. But that only lasted a year. And after a year, I was like, that's enough. I am definitely not a sports person. I'm a music person. So I went to work for a radio, like a broadcasting company that basically they oversee a lot of the top radio stations in like the main market. So that was really cool because I learned about putting events together. Whereas like in the record label side, back then there were 360 like deals, but record labels weren't really putting the concerts together. And even now, it's usually like they partner with a promoting company or someone to put it
Hmm.
together. So on that end, I learned about like putting events together. I also learned about like how to make a pitch to brand sponsors that really matters and it's going to be impactful for them. And that's where I started learning a little bit more. Like I knew about licensing opportunities from working at the label, but it was very much like a superficial thing. And here I learned about a lot more opportunities. Oh, okay. So through the radio station, like these licensing opportunities could be brought to musicians. And how can we leverage that? How can we make this a bigger story than what it currently is? And so that was really great. It's also a very tough job. It's probably I think radio is probably the toughest job in all of the music industry just because of the hours, the need to constantly communicate. It's a direct to consumer kind of business versus at the label level. You're really there's like a huge thing in between you and the consumer, which is like the
Right.
DSP or whatever. But this is like literally direct to consumer.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's like one of the hardest jobs. Some of the people in radio are probably the worst paid, but they are probably the most impactful. So it was a really great experience, but definitely recommend. I wish I would have done that at the beginning of my career rather than the middle of it. And I definitely recommend anyone who is out there who is wanting to get in the music industry, I think starting with radio is probably the best way to go.
Yeah. That's interesting. That was actually the first place that I worked as well. I worked for a radio station in Chicago and had been like music director for my college radio station. And It's true. I feel like you you nailed the essence of like why it's so special is and also difficult is that you are direct to consumer and like you're actually creating connective tissues and like you can have a relationship as a DJ with the people who are listening and like you're impacting their music taste and it's not like a label, it's not some kind of a no name huge brand that you don't really interact with. It like actually feels personal. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
So then what happened after radio? Getting involved with major labels, and I'm also curious to work toward when you started to see Web3 as an alternative route to some of these things.
Yeah. So after the working at radio, I went back to the record label life. And again, it was a different world. Like budgets were so different. And it made me start thinking about more what is rather than thinking about like the good about music, I realized that my thinking was more like optimizing. Like how can we bring the most funds in because that's what label life makes you think. You're in the release cycle. And I was given the opportunity to work for this sub label that was this boutique label. It was experimental. We weren't going to be focusing on like the release week. It was a little scary to go into that, but I had an artist. Her name is Bad Gal, and right now she's having a great development moment and she's getting a lot bigger than what she was when I worked with her. But she had this really passionate fan base. And we had this like merch company that would come up with all these merch items. And half of the time I thought everything that you're pitching or everything you think would be great is so dumb. I don't know anybody that would buy this. That was just my personal opinion. And they were like, no, we really think the fans would buy it. We're going to go with it. And the artist was excited about it. She's like, yeah, let's do it. And everything would sell out. Everything would sell out. And I thought, this is insane. I had never seen that before. And so I thought, what other products are out there? What can we look at it? And back then, I think only The Weeknd had done NFTs, and maybe Shawn Mendes did one. And so I thought, okay, let's see what an NFT looks like for her. So I started researching, connecting with a lot of different people. Back then, there were different agencies that were helping you put it together, and it just didn't work out, sadly, but I know the artist is very excited. She wanted to, for example, include royalty points for her fans so that they would get paid back then. Like even before,
Cool.
this is before Royal was a thing, or even, what's the other one? Another block. So
Mhm.
it was so exciting for me to see that because I was like, oh, she's thinking creatively. She's thinking, what else can I give my fans? And sadly, it just didn't work out. And first, it took a little bit with legal to come around and figure out how this works and how we're going to make it so that we do have to pay out the royalties. And then the next hurdle was finance. And finance was like, what is this? Like, we're not setting up a crypto wallet. Like, how are we going to
Mhm.
manage this? And so that was that. And, the label eventually shut down and I decided to move away. I took some personal time after a long time. I think I was in a space where I was like very burnt out. I had just had a kid, I want to say 2 years or a year before that. And I was just like, okay, I need a space. And then when I came back, I knew I didn't want to work on the label side of things. I wanted to work more on the tech side of things. And I eventually said, I'm like, you know what? Let me find out more about NFTs. And literally, there was an artist that I met with, and she's, I want to do NFTs. I
Mm.
don't know how to do it, but I know you're going to be the person to tell me how to do it. And I was like, okay. And so at that moment, I didn't know enough. So I just took with it and I was like, let me learn as much as possible. And I did. And I think I sent my DM to like Excelencia. I was the first artist I met in the space in like the beginning of 2022. But by then, I had already been doing research for a little bit. And that's when I started coming out and saying things. And I realized that there were a lot of people here in the Web3 space that didn't know a lot about the regular music business. So it was like a great trade. Here, I'll give you my knowledge, you give me your knowledge, and now I'm here.
Yeah, and I think that intersection that you just alluded to at the end there is a really important one to think about because it does feel like there are a lot of Web3 people who have less experience in the Web2 space and the legacy industry, and and then obviously vice versa. But it's so important to have that kind of cross section of knowledge to prevent Web3 from repeating some of the same mistakes, from creating the same systems, maintaining the status quo. And that's why I think like some of the work that you're doing now with Legato is so interesting and really trying to preempt regulation and create precedent for a new way to create kind of a legal infrastructure for this new space. And I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about what Legato is, how you got involved with this work, and what you're working on right now.
Sure. Yeah. Legato So Legato is a licensing as a service website. Basically, our mission is to allow artists to monetize or unlock new levels of monetization with their music. Rather than just selling NFTs, you can sell NFT licensing, which are soulbound NFTs that where you're basically licensing your music. You're giving someone an opportunity to just come and say, "Hey, I would like to use your music. What kind of products do you have available?" In this case, products are licenses, and you can and the artist kind of is put in the driver's seat. They can set up their parameters, the terms of the contract, and also what the price is going to be for the license to be acquired. And the buyer can literally just come in, no negotiation, no back and forth or contacting 1,000 different people, and just say, okay, I'm going to license this track, pay the money, and be able to license it from that point forward. So yeah, the goal is really to simplify this whole process because right now, I mean, if it's for a sync license, for example, you have to negotiate the license, then sign it. Then you have to submit W-2s if you're here in the US, and then eventually everyone gets paid. If you're international, it's even more complicated because then you have to pay taxes of cryptocurrency and crypto transactions. So we're able to shorten that and make it easier.
I'm curious if you've seen or if you've experienced any issues with people looking to contract things they don't own the entirety of. If there were like other if there were other songwriters, or if any of the work was done through a label or working with a publisher. Have you seen that conflation of the Web2 contractual world and these new contracts that you're building with Legato?
Right now we haven't. We still haven't opened our closed beta just yet. But I have seen a lot of music that does not belong to people get uploaded to the blockchain. I think that's probably we're missing a little bit of technology there. Just when I say we, I mean like the greater community as a whole, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
there's no fingerprinting tool for the blockchain, and we need that. That's super super important. I do know of a couple of people that are working on that, and I'm excited to see what it when it does work, but I do think that's important. And it's difficult, right? Because a lot of times people are not putting things on the blockchain and selling NFTs. Those splits don't necessarily equate to a copyright registration.
Right.
So at Legato, we have a solution called a blueprint where you upload the track and you put the splits in, and we're hoping that replicates that copyright registration step where it's like that tells you who owns the song and who has rights to get paid to the song. But there are I posted a Mirror article a while ago about how the ownership of a track is so multi-layered and complicated and everything is so bifurcated in the music industry.
Mm.
It is probably the most difficult thing to do because there's the songwriters, sometimes there's even publishers, like different publishers, which one for each different songwriter. And then you have the performance rights organizations and the labels, and there's so many different layers, right? And each one of them decides a different thing, right? Sometimes labels have control as to whether or not a track can be licensed. Other times they don't. Other times they just have to get paid, and that's it. So yeah, there's control, there's provenance to see who created the track, and then there's who gets paid for the track. How those three things play with each other is going to be interesting, but I think the blockchain probably has the solution for how to solve that entire fiasco and mess that we have now.
Totally. We'll need a period of transition to begin onboarding enough artists to get new use cases and build out in a way that is a bit more scalable so things can be open. Something like a fingerprinting tool, I think, would go a long way. I'm curious if you're aware of any, as you mentioned earlier, the major labels are not exactly known for being the most innovative entities and are pretty slow moving. Obviously, they're all aware of Web3 and what's being created on the blockchain, and this year have become more outspoken. People like Lucien Grange, the CEO of Universal Music Group, has come out and said, regardless of what his actual intentions are, he is publicly saying we need to do something about the payout model that exists in the streaming paradigm, and we need to shake things up. I'm curious if you're aware of any conversations or any innovations that are happening inside the majors or peripheral to them that are actually exciting.
I think it's crazy because I know that majors they know about this, they want to go into it, but majors just really want something where they can plug and play. And right now that's
Right.
not really available. They've
Mhm.
experimented and they've had partnerships with Let Me, like the LimeWire, the Curio, there's so many different partnerships. That's what they want. They want to sign these partnerships, but they're not the thing is that Web3 is so much more than just the technology, it's also the community. And so that's where they're having a hard time. There's no really an in for them to come and this is our space, this is what we're gonna take. So we'll see. I do know there are experiments happening. Obviously, Kingship is very famously the Bored Ape boy band or Bored Ape PFP band, I guess that's what you would call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are experiments happening and there are people that are testing it out, but it's really largely independent musicians that are going to lead the charge when it comes to this. And that's probably why Lucian Grange said what he said, because he sees like the piece of the pie that is independent music is getting bigger and bigger. And
Hmm.
artists have less and less incentives to sign with labels. And so that to me is interesting to see why these things are changing. Now, I personally don't think there's very few artists that are going to be able to make a living just selling NFTs. So there is of course going to be space for labels to participate. They just have to figure out a way of doing it in a way that feels meaningful. Web3 doesn't work if you just come here to take. You really have to come in and build. So labels have to figure out like what's going to be their contribution to this whole greater ecosystem in order for it to be beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I just saw that there are about 4,000 tracks coming from the major labels every single day to streaming platforms, and yet there are 24 other tracks for every one that's coming from the majors from elsewhere, not in the majors. I think the point that you made about community and like on-chain music culture as being an integral part of this experience, and a lot of people coming from the legacy industry see it as more of a web 2 plus crypto. It's like we've created a tokenized financialized system for the existing paradigm, which obviously is not the case. And one thing that comes to mind in thinking about this on-chain music culture, this sublime weirdness, and I've been thinking a lot about recently, in is what happened to Dreams Never Die pretty recently, which is a Web3 music label for those who don't know. And recently there was some tumult in the community when one of the co-founders resigned and the rest of the core team was let go very abruptly. And in a subsequent town hall that was meant to address some of those changes, there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of pretty ugly behavior. And I know that you, Steph, were unfortunately treated very rudely on that call, and wanted to create space to get your perspective on that experience from a personal perspective, and also like how it connects to this larger idea of its kind of essence of what makes Web3 music like really powerful.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So before this call, I had a baby in 2022, June 2022. And the whole experience of me being pregnant, I have an older kid who's 4, and I had him while I was at the label. So that whole experience of me having a child and becoming a mother and all these new things that happen, I was at a really vulnerable time. And working at a label, you just like power through it. And I didn't realize how many things were messed up of the way that happened. There were meetings where things were said. People, there was no space, for example, for me to just pump my milk. Like all these things, like just were so weird. And well, my direct bosses were very supportive of me becoming a mother and congratulating me. I definitely felt a shift. It was a change of the way people spoke to me, treated me. Meetings were being scheduled at times that weren't really convenient for me because now I had a baby to go home to. It was definitely felt ugly. And I had some sort of it didn't feel supported when that happened, and it just left an ugly taste in my mouth. And so when I had my second baby, I was fully in Web3. I Most of the people didn't know I was pregnant until I literally had to tell them, "Hey, I might be missing for a few days because that's what I was planning on, because I'm gonna go have a baby." And they were like, "What? You're pregnant?" And so that was like it was like a great thing, and everyone was really supportive when I had the baby. All the communities I was in were supportive. Even now, when you hear the noise of my kid in the background, people are like, okay, we understand. Moms are welcome here. I have been in this cocoon of like safe space for a while, for about a year. So for me, this Dreams Never Die call wasn't like, I came into this false sense of security, I guess, if there's a way to put it. So this new person who joined the team, I knew nothing of them. And I was just, I literally, I feel like a mama bear about the community too. And so the whole talk three, like what artists are on Web3 because they failed in Web2, like that sort of thing, like it hurt me, right? Because I'm like, no, you don't know these people. And my attempt was really to just try to explain like this is a different cult, like we're building a counterculture here which will eventually become mainstream, like every counterculture has their moment in the sun, but it takes time. So for me it was just shocking, right? So the moment they started like ascribing like this sort of like emotion or like feeling to what I was saying, instead of engaging in the discussion, I went to the thing that I normally would, like especially now being in Web3. So I said, oh, like maybe you're just not familiar with hearing familiar female voice, which happens all the time. And I have said this in Twitter Spaces other times too. Like when there's a bunch of male voices on space, I said when they make a joke, I say something like that, and it's usually disarming rather than arming. And obviously in this space it wasn't the case. It made them double down, and so it was really bizarre. And then to start hearing all of these tropes, right? And it brought me back to label life. Because those calls, that exact call, everything, how it happens like that, it's happened before. Not only to me, but to other women I love and respect and I've seen happen. So it definitely it took me back. So it felt a little bit like being brought back to that, like PTSD to use that term probably poorly, but yeah, it was definitely like, whoa, like what's happening? This is not the people I know and love. Like this is not Web3. And so it was definitely shocking. But the difference was this time, it was recorded, and I don't, I understand that in the recording it says it wasn't recorded, but it was very publicly put on the public chat. The bot that records call was very publicly called upon in the beginning. And so I don't know. I'm glad it was recorded because I feel like these stories need to be told and these people need to be held accountable. And two, it was just so beautiful to see how like the community was like, no, we do not welcome this here. In a space where there is no HR, there is no party that can discipline bad behavior. It was good to see that the community, we did that ourselves. And it was really sweet to have just different people reach out to me and check in on me. I really appreciated that more than anything. But I'm just glad that we're saying like, hey, this is not how we do things here. And I'm happy because that means we have a really good thing going.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that was really beautifully put. And yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. It was unwarranted. But I'm happy that what came from it is people reaching out to you, showing kindness. And yeah, I shared your reaction of being heartened by the strength of the community, being like, this is where the bullshit rises to the top. And this isn't why we're here. We're trying to do things differently. And people willing to be outspoken about that and standing ground, protect the space that we're trying to cultivate to create something better. I think you used the word reductive. And yeah, I think that was spot on in terms of how the person who's talking was talking about this space, on-chain music, as basically like now there are tokens on top of what we're doing in Web 2, like at the major labels, and that's how it works. And hopefully, I'm really hopeful that we can, as the space inevitably grows, as you said, as the counterculture loses its counter and moves more toward mainstream culture in whatever fashion that takes, that the essence of it persists. I think it's, really important that we do that. I appreciate people like you who are standing up for that. Like you're one of the most active, outspoken people I've seen in the space. I feel like in every community and every Discord space, every Telegram group I go in, I see your name somehow. You're everywhere, which is amazing. Especially having kids, like I don't know how you find the time.
Yeah, I don't, to be honest with you, I don't know either. And it's crazy to me that now that my kid can be like put down and entertain himself for a bit. I don't know how I did it in the beginning, but I remember being back in spaces like when my baby was like a week old, and oh, that's what happened. Now I remember this. This is just a cute story. So my first kid, he would fall asleep with music because I played so much music when I was pregnant, and this second kid, he fell asleep listening to Voices on Spaces. So I was like, looks like I gotta be back on Spaces so I can make him go to sleep. So that, yeah, I think some of that helped. But I don't know. I do have a lot of help. My husband, he's very supportive, and I also have my parents that are around and they can help as well.
Cool.
We do what we can, but yeah, it's definitely crazy over here.
I imagine. So in your mind, like what are some of the communities that are kind of our best representatives as of this kind of on-chain music culture essence today?
Yeah, I think water and music is probably one of the best communities. I would say if anyone's going to get in the space, start with water and music because everyone is so smart. There are so many people that have achieved and worked on so many incredibly amazing things. So, water and music is a great place to start. Hi-Fi Labs is also really great. One community that I'm really passionate about, and I'm not entirely sure what my role in it is going to be. I'm like literally just like a supporter and watcher, is Campfire. I love how they just put these camps together and help musicians be musicians. And there's this beautiful music that's coming out of that space. And I'm very excited about what comes out of Campfire. And then, of course, I cannot say enough or speak highly enough about Zoratopia, what Latasha builds, and it's meant to be like a space for inclusion, and what she builds is just it's just beautiful. You have performances of people that like run the gamut of genres, but then you also have beautiful art, and then you have panels that educate people or inspire people. I don't know, I feel I'm really excited about what Zoratopia is, or whatever the next iteration of that is going to be. She has truly built something that is meaningful and definitely important. And I know I'm forgetting, but whatever, if Natalie Cruz out there, whatever she's working on is amazing. So just keep an eye on her, and if you follow her around, will not be steered wrong.
Cool. Awesome. For those people listening who are curious but haven't yet taken the dive, those are some great places to start. And yeah, joining a Web3 music community is easy as just going and introducing yourself and meeting people. It's great. It's a nice way to dig in, see what's going on. Okay, Steph, I just have one more question for you. It's unrelated to all of this, but I ask everybody at the end of these. You're going to a desert island. You get to bring 3 albums with you. Which ones do you bring?
Oh, I feel like these are always changing for me.
That's okay. It's an impossible question.
So
Yeah.
I know it's a good question. Okay, so I always say Beyonce's Lemonade, and the reason
Mm.
that album is like not removed there is because it runs the gamut of like feelings, but also genres, and so that's like a good album to just bring with you. I'm gonna go with Jason Mraz.
Nice.
I know this one's gonna be like a weird thing, but he's just really been chilling me out recently. Oh my god, the album that has, yeah, I think it's just called, no, We Sing, We Dance, We Steal. That's the
Mm.
one. The one that has I'm Yours. It was just like that was a period of time
Mm.
where like I needed music to really build me out, and he really does a good job at doing that. And then Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, because that's
Oh,
just
nice.
Stevie. He's good. He makes me happy. But these are
Yeah,
always changing. I feel like I
totally.
would be very bad. Like it would probably last me like 90 days before I'm like I need more albums, and I'd just probably swim back to somewhere else to find
Yeah.
more albums.
Yeah. Hopefully by 90 days you've been rescued by a helicopter or something or a boat from
Yes.
your island. Cool. Steph, thank you so much for being here. Just before we sign off, what is the best place for people who are interested in following along or getting involved with your projects? What's the best place, for them to follow you?
Yeah, so if you want to follow Legato, we're at Legato HQ on Twitter, and then just check out our website. It's legatohq.com. If you sign up for the Get Started on the Get Started tab, you can get more information and sign up for the beta. And then for me, I'm at Steph underscore Guerrero on Twitter, and then Guerrero Steph on Instagram. Pretty sure once you get there, you'll be able to find me anywhere else. And I try to answer to as many DMs as possible. I'm better about it on Twitter than I am on Instagram, but I definitely will get around to you on Instagram.
Cool. There you have it, folks. Go check out what Steph is doing. She's involved in some really cool projects. And yeah, thank you again for being here, Steph. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that's it for this episode of Big Brother and the Hodling Company. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice, and you can keep up with me and all the latest Web3 music trends on Twitter at McKeegan. That's MACEAGON. This show is a production of Decentral Media, and you can visit us at decentral.io. And remember, only you can prevent and fend off Big Brother.